Gynecologists, what's the most unpleasant thing you've seen while working? Dear friends, enjoy your meal. My sister's boyfriend was doing a gyno rotation. He was quite upset, as he was examining a woman that from sight and smell alone it was obvious she had cervical cancer so advanced that she wasn't going to make it. For the first time on that rotation he had to warn someone about their imminent death. It was all very depressing and solemn, so it was quite a relief when it turned out to be a tampon that had been in there long enough to resemble a tumor. Edit, on TSS someone correct me if I'm wrong, but as I understand it the bacteria that causes TSS is either present in a patient or not, like MRSA. TSS is not an inevitable consequence of disgusting tampon behavior. One of my friends worked as an intern with a gynecologist 2 years ago. There was a client complaining that she couldn't get pregnant. She also had been having diarrhea for a long time. The gynecologist asked if she regularly had anal sex and the woman confirmed that she only did it anally. Apparently her husband had told her you can get pregnant from anal sex, so she wanted it nonstop to get pregnant. I thought there were laws against forcing anal sex onto a mentally handicapped person. Not a doctor, but I had a rather odd experience. Went in for a routine pap at UCSF. My doctor was doing his thing when he asked if a few new doctors could come in and have some hands-on experience. I agreed, and 3 ridiculously attractive male doctors came in. They all took their turns putting their fingers up my vagina, discussing it like I wasn't there. And now I can say I've had 4 different men put their fingers up my vagina in under 30 minutes. Joke's on you, they weren't doctors. My wife is an OB/GYN specializing in maternal fetal medicine, which is basically high-risk patients. She had an obese diabetic woman come in with an abscess the size of a lemon on her labia. When they lanced it, the abscess exploded, missing my wife, but hitting her nurse. She described the smell as worse than 1,000 decaying bodies, and the nurse with over 10 years of experience proceeded to throw up all over the exam room. And because of this comment, I am getting to fuck out of this thread before I lose my breakfast. One that a colleague in OB/GYN shared a while back. A woman was in for a pelvic exam, is up in the stirrups, and my colleague has her fingers in up to the cervix. At this point, something possesses the woman to ask, and I quote, "So, do you ever think about stuffing a turkey while you're doing this?" My colleague, trying to keep a straight face, answers, "No, but now I will every Thanksgiving." The woman finds this hilarious and proceeds to stare my colleague dead in the eye while yelling gobble, with my colleague's hands still up her hoodie hoo. I still enjoy telling that story to friends at Thanksgiving. It means more turkey for moi. And then she went home and wrote the screenplay for the movie Julie. XGF's dad used to be in the field before retiring. Worst case he had was a woman who was a heroin addict. For whatever reason she had to get creative with where she injected. Apparently, she considered her labia a good place. That was until they went gangrene on her. Oh my god, it's like a much more horrible version of Requiem for a Dream. My mom works as a gynecologist's assistant and she has told me a few stories. A woman once went in and apparently filled an entire room with her putrid stench. She had been wearing the same underwear for 2 months and her panties, which were originally white, became a darkish yellow-brown. She apparently wasn't very good at wiping either. You know these were white when I bought them. When I was 13, I was diagnosed with endometriosis. I had to go to the gynecologist about once every 4 months for checkups because my endo was pretty severe and was growing back quickly. My regular doctor was great, but I had to see another doctor while he was out of town. I was 14 at the time and this other doctor was really rough during her exam, had long fingernails that seriously felt like she was cutting into me, etc. She then ends the whole exam by telling me that I should get pregnant soon because that would cure the endo. My mom flipped out at this woman. Keep in mind I was 14. And we never saw her again. Oh, and getting pregnant is not a cure for endo. Doctor told 14-year-old me to get pregnant. That woman does not need to be a woman's health doctor. She sounds out of her mind. And wouldn't there be some sort of rule against having long nails? I know this isn't what you're after, but when having my butt fingered for a prostate examination, the doctor told me that he couldn't feel my prostate because my butt was fully loaded. I felt both ashamed and proud at the same time. My first digital rectal exam, the doctor, some old coot, forgot, or didn't care, to use any lube. Just his bone-dry gloved finger rammed up my ass. I left that appointment bleeding from the ass. Bonus points, he was my employer's doctor. I had to have routine medical evaluations from that old bastard to maintain clearance to work. Not a gyno but was an EMT/firefighter about 10 years back. treated a very attractive woman who decided to dump about 4 ounces of Drano into slash on her vagina to kill the sperm that her date left in her by accident. Just think of an English bulldog who got popped an Alka-Seltzer, got into a Costco-sized jar of mayo and then was punched in the face about 10 times. That's what it resembled. To add to the awkward factor, about a year later I met a very attractive woman at a grocery store, got her number and met her for drinks. Later that night we ended up at my place making out. As soon as I started taking her shirt off I suddenly remembered that the girl who I had taken out for drinks was the one who previously dumped Drano into her vag. Our night ended abruptly and awkwardly, as you can imagine. This is a story from a friend's dad. Happened 3 summers ago. An overweight woman comes into the office for an STD test and pelvic exam, complaining of colorful discharge, an awful stench, and burning during urination. She assumes she has gonorrhea. Wrong. It was much worse. He gets in there for the pelvic exam, all the while assaulted by the stench of rot, and finds a dead frog in her vagina. This thing is heavily decomposed, since the warmth of the woman's vaginal cavity has helped to speed up the process, and he has to pull it out piece by piece. Needless to say, she also had a wicked UTI. The woman explained that she passed out naked and drunk / high / whatever at some party at her boyfriend's house, and figures he were one of his friends must have thought it would be an absolute riot to put a live frog up her vag. She apparently did not seem bothered by the fact that an animal had died and decomposed in her vagina, just relieved she didn't have gonorrhea. Edit. For extra gross out factor, it's worth knowing that this was in Memphis, Tennessee, where temperatures routinely get well over 100 F with over 90% humidity. Think about that. I'm on placement as a scrub nurse for a gyna theater. I've seen many gross things in my time here. Mostly it's been terrible smells and a whole load of prolapses, but one case really sticks in my mind. This poor woman came in with cervical cancer, and she got treated for it with chemo. For some reason, I don't know the medical technicalities behind this, her rectum and vagina fused, and any bowel movement she had would erupt furiously out of her vag. She was also very overweight, so couldn't properly clean herself, meaning all the festering shit and general uncleanliness had caused everything down there to start rotting. Nurse here. I had a girl come into the ER walking funny. She was complaining of pain near her vagina. She has an ingrown pubic hair next to her vagina that was infected and created a 4 cm lesion of pus and stench. The PA and I had to drain the vesicle. I think I screamed louder than her when it popped while the PA was injecting some lidocaine to numb the area. It's sad. With no insurance, the poor girl let it go for so long before she spent the money for a doctor. Former forever aloner here. When I was 19, I went in for my first pap. The gyno asked if I was still a virgin, and I said yes. She said, "Your hymen is still intact. If you don't get someone to break it by the time you're 21, you're going to have to come back so I can break it for you." What a magical first time that would have been. Not sure if kidding or planned rape. I imagine it's because you need to start getting pap smears at 21, and if her hymen was completely covering her vag she would need it broken. My aunt is a gynecologist and she, very awkwardly, lectured me after a recent client had visited. Apparently this girl and her boyfriend decided to get creative, so they used tuna and milk to, eat her out. The girl kept getting random orgasms in class and went to find out she had maggots. So gross. Just a tip. My friend once went to the OB/GYN. He turned out to be a rude person. He used one of them silver reverse clampy thingies, I don't know what they're called, to keep her vagina open, took some sample of something and went to look at it under the microscope. She asked him if he could remove that clamp thing, and he refused, saying this will only take a second. So she lay there, uncomfortable and stressed, with that reverse clamp holding her vagina open. When he was finally done with the microscope and turned back to her, her muscles contracted and the clampy thingy shot out and hit him in the crotch. He yelled at her because those were his favorite pants and she yelled back because he was an asshole. Which American Pie movie was your friend in again? Silver reverse clampy thing is called a speculum. I ran into a guy at my high school reunion who had become a gynecologist. He didn't tell stories, but he said it wasn't a moundhound's dream job. Most women typically don't go to a gynecologist unless there's a problem, and very few are Playboy model types. As for the turn-on factor, he likened it to a dentist who appreciates a beautiful smile. That dentist doesn't necessarily get aroused staring into clamped open mouths day in and day out. He said he lived in fear of being in a crowded place and hearing someone call out, "Is there a doctor in the house?" I've always enjoyed a shapely butt on a woman, but it never entered my mind to become a proctologist. Mound hound. Somehow the weirdest thing I took away from this